Hello, all. Welcome to another round of Voices of AI Leadership. I'm your host, Malti Bakalanka, CEO of Bio, a data intelligence firm. Today, I'm super excited to have Jennifer Dulski, founder and CEO of Rising Teams, a company rethinking how leaders build high performing, human centered teams in a fast changing AI driven world. So, in this episode, we look into a packed value to explore what really drives team performance, how leaders scale trust and accountability, and why intentional connection is becoming one of the most critical leadership skills today. So, let's dive in. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
So, you have spent your career building and leading teams at Yahoo, Google, and Facebook. And now you're helping managers become better leaders through Rising Team. Rising Team is built on the belief that strong teams aren't created by perks or policies, but by intentional connection and leadership. So, looking back across your career, what moments or experience most shaped that belief for you?
It's interesting, if I think about what has most shaped my belief in great leaders and great teams, it actually comes before my work history, which is that in high school and college, I was a coxswain on the rowing team. If people are familiar with crew as a sport, the coxswain is the person who sits in the back of the boat and steers and coaches the team during the race. You keep the pace, you help them understand when to put in more and how quickly to go and, coach their oars going in. And I learned so much about what it takes to, first earn respect as a leader. One of the things that happens when you're sitting there and everyone's rowing, working as hard as they can is how do you actually earn the respect of a team when you're not working hard in that moment? So things like, I had to do every single workout we did out of the boat. So a lot of my early leadership lessons came from there. Things like how to give good feedback, how to understand how to motivate different people differently, how to earn respect, how to push people harder than they think they can go, create clarity of vision, etc. When I look at my career after those early days, I certainly had the great fortune to work at a lot of very inspiring, innovative companies, as you mentioned. And the incredible thing about high performing teams and leaders is that it's consistent across all different types of environment and size and shape of company and organization and industry. And that's what we've really found at Rising Team is the underlying science of what drives high performing teams is the same, regardless of what kind of organization you work for.
I love the comparison you gave, Jennifer, of a boat and you sitting. It's in a way you have a strategy kind of mindset, a goal, you see a big vision, and you see how the things come to achieve those, which is every part of it you encourage, motivate. And it's so nice that that has become your founding thing for Rising Teams. Thank
That's
you for
right. In fact, Rising Team is based on the principle that great managers are like great sports coaches. And we actually use, even though we don't have this on our website, we use a system in the background we call the 3 Cs, which is clarify, coach, and connect. So the best coaches, if you look at, the best athletes and sports teams on earth, the first thing they do is clarify what winning looks like. What does it mean to be successful? What does that goal look like? And that's the same in our workplaces. What are the top priorities that we really need to focus on? The second is coach, which means do you put the right players in the right positions? And Jim Collins famously calls this right person, right seat on the bus. How do you pull the right people together and get the most out of each individual person, understand their needs and preferences? And the third is connect, which you mentioned in your introduction, which I think a lot of people leave out. They forget that to make a team really function at its highest performance, people need to feel connected to each other.
So, on that note, Jennifer, why does managing people feel harder today than it did even 5 years ago?
It feels incredibly harder, and you're so right about this. And we hear it from our customers all the time. So we work with companies like Google and Hershey and HP and Cisco and also nonprofits and government agencies like you do. And we hear the same consistent themes across all of them. There are 4 things that are making work really hard right now for managers. The first is drive to efficiency. So most companies and organizations are in a world where we need to do more with less. And they're often eliminating that layer of middle management, giving people bigger and bigger teams and more goals to manage. The second is constant transformation. So all the time, organizations are having new strategies, a lot of leadership changes, reorgs, et cetera, which is a lot on individual managers to understand. The third is the continuation of distributed and hybrid work. So, some companies are going back to 5-day in office, but most are not. So everybody is working on this kind of hybrid schedule, and teams are getting more and more globally distributed, which makes it really hard to connect and bring a team together. And the fourth, which is the subject of your podcast, is intense pressure to learn, understand, and use AI. And so if you are a manager sitting in this tornado that we see of efficiency, transformation, hybrid, distributed work, and pressure around AI, it is so hard to know what to do. And up until now, it's also been really hard for companies to give the support to managers that they need at scale in a way that was affordable enough and scalable enough through your whole org. And that's the amazing thing is we now have the technology to do that. And that's what we do at Rising Team.
Wonderful. And I think you also have a product, right, which really helps with the AI coaching as well.
That's right. That's what I'm saying is that, before, like in my career, I come from these large tech companies, as you mentioned, and I was a division leader, an org leader. So I had lots of support because I was an executive. I was given executive coaches. I was sent to trainings that were really amazing. And yet I had very little to give the hundreds or sometimes thousands of managers that worked in my org. And that's just because it was too expensive. I could not give a coach to every person because human coaches cost a lot of money. Even the virtual ones that you meet on Zoom cost a lot of money, and I couldn't afford to do that. And the things I could afford, which were like video training and things managers did on their own, they just weren't that compelling. And so people didn't learn a lot. We taught them all like exactly the same thing at the same time, in cohorts or on their own. And then we sent them back to their teams and kind of crossed our fingers that they did anything that we taught them. And now we live in a completely different world. So I can now afford to give every single manager in a large organization their own personal coach and role play partner, the equivalent of like a personal leadership trainer who takes their baseline and gets them to the high performance leadership they want to. I can give them the equivalent of a team building facilitator who will come in and run any kind of connective session they want with their team. It's them, but it's guided by software, so they become the facilitator. And soon we'll be able to give them AI agents that are very much like what an executive assistant would do. And so we now can do all of those things. Basically, every manager can get what used to cost an executive probably $100,000 or more for like 1% of the cost. We can do that for every manager. And we now call it super manager. So we can turn every manager into a super manager. And actually, we have a website up at supermanager.ai, which people can sign up for the waiting list if they want to.
Okay. It's great to know, Jennifer. So for a person who would like to understand what exactly a Rising Team does, how would you explain to them who is your audience? How can somebody try to understand the product as such?
Yeah. So our product is an AI leadership platform. We help companies build high-performing leaders and teams at scale. And it combines two key components. One is an AI coach and role play partner. And we think of it like a personal trainer. So imagine, for instance, the two of us were going to try to train for a triathlon. Have you ever, do you like running or swimming or biking?
Yeah. We always do the marathons, at least once or twice a year. So
You do marathons once or twice a year?
yes, absolutely. And triathlons I've not really ventured upon, but yeah, that's one day maybe.
That is amazing. So let's say you and I were going to train for a triathlon and we hired a fitness trainer to help us. You already run marathons, so you wouldn't need the same plan as I do. I like to run also, but my max run is kind of like K or something. So the training plan they would give me is very different than the training plan they would give you. That's what Rising Team role play coach, we call it again personal trainer does, is they start by understanding each manager, what they feel really comfortable in and where they need more support, and then they help them come up with a plan in very little amount of time. Call it a few hours a quarter or a few minutes a week where you're working towards those leadership skills. And you can practice with your AI coach, and you can also role play with your AI coach, like hard conversations that you need to have about performance reviews or promotions or things like that. We actually modeled the role play after the class that I teach at the business school at Stanford, which is
Lovely.
100% role play based. We can talk about that a little bit more. So the first component of Rising Team is this AI leadership coach and trainer. The second is software guided synchronous team sessions that you can do with your team. And so, again, when I say great leaders clarify, coach, and connect, the team sessions are the connection part. It's not enough to just work with a personal trainer on your own. You have to bring the team together periodically to help them understand each other, their preferences, their talents, etc. And Rising Team offers software that we put into what we call kits. They range from 10 minutes to 2 hours on a variety of different topics. Some are just fun and playful, some are more deep and personal, and some are more really work related that help teams work better together and build that deeper trust and connection.
Wow, lovely. So you're basically taking care of everything in the company ecosystem, both at both ends, to make sure that they have the coaching readily available no matter what. Especially those are areas which are very I would say it may look easy, but it is very hard conversations to have, and you need kind of the dialogue coming in. So, on that note, does it have also a voice? For example, let's say I'm trying my best to get better at public speaking, or getting ready to do a town hall meeting. Would your product also do voice modulation, or is it more of a text kind of thing?
It's voice to voice. So the role play portion is an actual partner who will talk to you. So
Okay.
you go in, you pick, the real unique benefit of Rising Team is that the platform works together. So the AI coach and the team sessions learn from each other, right? So if I'm in a team session and I might learn about someone on my team that they prefer to receive their constructive feedback with
Yeah.
some context about why it matters, and they like to be listened to by having someone paraphrase what they're saying,
Right.
then the role play partner that I'm using knows that about the person, and it will behave as them in my role play. And it will talk to me. It asks me what scenario I want to practice. I can pause it in the middle and say, can you coach me? I'm struggling with what to say here. It will give me ideas. As I go back and forth, it will score me at the end about how well I did against the objective I was trying to achieve. So yes, if you want to say, I need to practice a town hall conversation and I want to try practicing the Q&A. Can you listen to my speech and ask me some sample questions after and then score me on how I answer? It can do that.
That is super exciting, Jennifer.
It really is. Honestly, I have been leading teams for almost 30 years, and I wish I had this earlier in my career. And
Yeah.
I use it now. I use it all the time now to practice.
Yeah. I mean, especially I feel in every level in the career, as you're going up in the organization, every time you need that constant, also somewhat of validation and reassurance. So having your product is super helpful and very efficient.
Yes.
So it just helps a lot with validation as well. So
And also at the end, it gives such specific suggestions. As I said, I teach a class at Stanford GSB called Managing Growing Enterprises. And
very
this class is actually quite challenging. I'm kind of grateful I didn't have to take it. What we do is we work with CEOs and we write cases about their most challenging scenarios that they've handled as a leader. And then we bring those to the class, and the students have to decide what they would have done in that situation. And they role play it in front of the whole class. So in front of all their peers, and also the CEO who the case is about comes as a guest. So they're role playing as that person with them sitting there watching them. It's a very high stress situation.
wow. Okay.
That said, what we do in class, which I believe is very helpful to them, is, as I said, we start by having them choose what objective they want, and then I score them on what I call the two C's, which is clarity and compassion. How clear were you in your communication, and how compassionate or empathetic were you to the person you're talking to? And when they practice with the tool in Rising Team, they also get that same scoring, and they get very specific suggested phrasing, both examples of phrases they used that worked particularly well, and also suggested ways they could improve in a way that's really immediately useful, which is hard. Human coaches are amazing, and they also just don't quite have the memory that AI coaches have. So AI
That is
coach can
that
remember
is
every single word I said and
yeah.
which one was well placed and wasn't. And I know myself as a human coach, I am not that good at that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So from your perspective as a founder and a CEO, what are the top 3 challenges leaders and managers are struggling with right now?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, there's the first is just the tornado that the market has become and handling all the change and transformation that's coming at them, especially how to use AI effectively. As we know, there's sort of a spectrum of how people are using AI. At one end, we have the kind of head in the sand people who aren't using it at all. And at the other, in kind of the middle, we may have the AI testers and some amount of AI slop, right? Like this is the term everybody uses now where you just dip your toe in the water and you're using it and what you're getting back isn't that great. And then at the sort of higher end, we have real experts who are coming out and learning how to use AI with really strong prompts and human judgment, and it is creating very high efficiencies. That challenge of how to learn and get good at that is the first one. The other two I would say are more ongoing and consistent over time. So when I look at the managers I've worked with, even and myself as a manager in my early days, the two main challenges I see managers having, the first is they tend to think everyone is just like them. So, as an example, I had someone on my team early in my career who came to me and said, if I ever do a good job, just pay me more money. Like, even if you can't give me a raise, just like a spot bonus or a gift card is what I would prefer. I don't really care about recognition or any of that. And at first, I was really taken aback by that because I thought, gosh, she just asked me for more money. That's like kind of rude. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was a huge gift to me that she did that because otherwise I wouldn't have known. And I would have just rewarded her the way I like to be rewarded, which, as it turns out, my favorite type of appreciation is handwritten note or a nice email. Like I'm a words of affirmation person.
Yes,
So
yes.
if she's looking for money and I give her a handwritten note, boy, will that fall flat. And most managers fall into this trap because it's easy. I think, boy, I like my feedback really direct, so I'm just going to give it to everybody really direct. And that, as it turns out, is not the way everybody wants it. And so one of the things we try to do at Rising Team is help people, give them tools to understand each other's preferences so that managers can deliver things in the way that their team members will best react. So that's the second one. And the third big challenge I see is time. So the biggest challenge we hear from everybody is, I don't have time. I'm just so busy. I'm so, entrenched in hitting my goals 24/7 that I don't have time for people related things. I don't have time for my one-on-ones, or I don't have time for team building connection kind of efforts. And I believe that is truly a flawed attitude. In fact, our data from Rising Team says that leaders who even spend 1% of their time, so the equivalent of 3 hours or less a quarter, drive massive lifts in employee retention, engagement, employee net promoter score, their own manager effectiveness scores, et cetera. But it is a challenge people face. And so we have to constantly work on how to make things more bite-sized and feasible.
I think that kind of relates to my next question, which actually most modern leadership requires both execution and psychological safety.
Yes.
It's what practices help leaders sustain that balance without creating like a long-term burnout or like disengagement.
Yeah. So Psychological safety is quite interesting, and a lot of our Rising Team kits are built on the premise of how do you create real psychological safety in a team. I believe in Tim Clark's philosophy of that there are 4 stages of psychological safety. So you start by helping people feel included, then helping them get comfortable to learn and ask questions, and then get comfortable collaborating with each other. And then finally, the 4th stage is called challenger safety, where you finally are comfortable speaking up when you think something's wrong or there was a mistake made. And so what we try to do is help leaders build into that. And it's a surprisingly easy thing to do if you just devote a tiny bit of attention to it and are intentional. So as an example, one of the very first ways we often start people is with one of our mini sessions. They're only a single question, usually 10 minutes long. And we have one that asks the question, what is something funny you got into trouble for as a kid?
Okay.
And it feels like just a light, fun team building question. Everybody answers. And I've heard the funniest stories. Like my favorite one, I think, is someone who told me that when they were little, they used to wrap their crayons in white paper and pretend to smoke them. And
Um,
their parents got really upset because they were like fake smoking as a
yeah.
child. But everybody has stories like that. And then if you go around the room and everybody tells a story about getting in trouble as a kid, all of a sudden, everyone has expressed some vulnerability and
Right.
has admitted that they're not always perfect. And then you start to see that modeled around the room. And then you can go from there to a work related question. Like sometimes the next one we'll do is called Festival of Failure, where we
Okay.
say, like, what's a mistake you made at work? And, what did you learn from it? And you just build it over time. It just takes a little bit of intentionality to
Uh-huh.
build that trust in teams over time. The burnout issue is a slightly different one, which has to do, not only do you need psychological safety, but you also need a sense of crystal clear prioritization. So we do have a Rising Team kit specifically on about prioritization. The key mistake people tend to make is thinking that you can be full out 24/7. It's just impossible for teams to do that. And so at Rising Team, we use a technique we now call super mode, where we go into super mode and brief periods of intensity where everybody is working on something. We usually have a theme. A lot of companies will call this lockdown or a war room or something like that. I've
Right.
done it at all the big companies I worked with. The main principle I use is leftover from crew, which is in those rowing races, there's something called a power 10, where you're already rowing as hard as you can. And the coxswain can call a power 10, which is 10 of the hardest possible strokes you could ever take. And they're
Oh,
just
wow.
pulling their heart out for 10 strokes. And then they go back to a manageable pace.
Mhm.
And what you learn is you cannot do an entire race of power 10s. You will
That's right.
certainly lose because people will tire out and they cannot sustain that pace. And
Right.
that's the key thing for leaders to remember is you can only call so many power 10s and you have to be purposeful about where you put them and
Okay.
how.
Nice. So, did this lead to any kind of a clear, measurable kind of shift in team performance? Like, how do you improve
Yeah, so we
communication?
we care a lot about impact, and as I said before, we measure impact. We actually use something we call the impact pyramid, where the bottom layer is psychological safety, and we measure that usually through survey questions like my manager is open to accepting my feedback and ideas, or I feel safe to express my ideas on this team. And we see statistically significant lifts in those kind of questions. And then from there, we measure things like employee engagement. So most companies have an employee engagement survey or some kind of pulse survey. We see both test and versus control. So people who do not use Rising Team versus people who do, and longitudinal. How does it grow over time? And based on the number of team sessions you run, the more sessions you run, the more often you do them, the more you use the coach, the higher those engagement numbers go. And there is clear statistically significant difference between with and without using our product. So that's the second thing. And then we also measure things like actual retention of employees. So turnover is a problem at a lot of organizations, especially with frontline employees, or certain groups may have lower retention than others. And we see, again, significant lift over baseline employee retention based on how often you use Rising Team. Up to, I think right now we're seeing 30 to 40% lift over baseline retention.
Nice.
And then lastly, we even look at productivity because we know this is so important to companies. It varies a little based on what team and function you're looking at. As an example, when we look at functions like IT or customer care, we actually see lift in number of issues they resolve by using Rising Team versus not, and before and after they start, which, to some people is counterintuitive, like taking time away from work. How does that actually make people more productive at work? And the science behind this, of course, is that the more people feel valued
Right.
at work, the harder they work.
Yeah. That
Pretty
is,
straightforward.
yeah, it is. It is true, actually. But how do you see the role of manager changing over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so this is where the super manager trend will really come in. I really strongly believe that over the next 5 to 10 years, we will see so much of the manual operational work of management go away and be handled by AI agents. So take something
Yes.
like weekly updates as an example. Like,
Mm.
oftentimes managers are requesting some kind of status update from their direct reports, and then they're compiling that into some kind of roll-up update that they're sending to their managers. Especially these middle manager layers have just a ton of non-strategic, very operational reporting and communication type work. That should be able to be almost entirely handled by AI. So already, for instance, there are agents that can go help you do that, and we're building many of those at Rising Team.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, we have some stuff coming soon on that front, which is already making jobs so much easier. The other thing is, right now, what we have is a lot of managers who got promoted because they were good at their function and they've never been trained on how to actually manage a team well. So they were a good engineer, or they were a good person, and now they're suddenly a manager of other engineers or
Right. Right.
salespeople, but they were never really taught. That is also going to go away because of AI, because now we can effectively, as I said, offer essentially a personal trainer to each person. So it's like,
Got it.
what we were doing before is we were literally starting people on the line of a triathlon and saying, good luck.
Right.
And now we can say, okay, let's help you. Let's help you practice. Let's train you. Let's see what you need. Let's check in with you on how you're doing.
Yes.
So it will all get a lot easier. That's sort of the upside. The downside, maybe, and maybe it's upside or downside, you can decide, is that teams will probably get much larger.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
um, the middle management layer, I think, will continue to shrink a bit as people can now effectively manage, instead of 5 to 7 people, maybe 10 to 12, or maybe 15, maybe even more over time. McKinsey, as I said, they say that managers currently spend 18% of their time on manual work, and that's about 1 day a week. So if that goes away, then you have more time to spend on the 3 most important parts I talked about before, the 3 C's. Clarify, like, how am I really setting vision, inspiring people? Coach, meaning how am I helping each person on my team grow and contribute the best? And connect, how do I make that team feel like a team? And within a few years, even much less 5 to 10, managers will be able to do that better for larger teams, and will need fewer mid-level managers to do that.
Nice. Nice. So we touched about managers. Now, going to the other end of the spectrum, right? So, what will truly separate high performing teams from everyone else?
Yeah. It's very similar, in fact. The idea is that, and the interesting thing, if you look at the science here, is that the drivers of high performing teams have really not changed. If you look at the past, 15 to 20 years, psychological safety is a relatively new concept in the last
Right.
10 years, which has
Yeah.
proven to be critical. Other than that, though, things like teams that are clear on what's expected of them,
Yeah.
teams that know how to give and receive feedback well and frequently, teams that feel appreciated and understood by each other, feel psychologically safe. All of these things are true and have been true 10, 15, 20 years more. I mean, I think about some of my favorite business books that teach concepts about this. And some of them were, I read in business school, which I went to
Yeah.
30 years ago. Like
Yeah.
this stuff
Yeah.
hasn't changed.
Yeah.
And actually, we also see it in the data because remember, like our product, even though it is customizable, most companies don't customize it because leadership skills are generally the same. And so that means, you know, managers at Google and, we have managers at the Massachusetts probation office, like the probation officers in the state of Massachusetts, and teachers in a K-12 school, and, IT folks at Hershey, like they all use the same product to drive high performing teams. So the things that teams need around expectations, feedback, appreciation, safety, they're just the same.
Same.
The more we can give them that to them, the better they perform. I think this is, again, one of the key manager mistakes is most managers don't do that. They just say, I don't have time for you. And therefore teams don't feel valued. They're not clear on what they're supposed to do. And then they're not high performing.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jennifer, you did touch upon this pretty much throughout. But as AI becomes embedded in work, right? How do you see data, AI, and human connections coexisting without
Yeah.
losing what makes teams human?
So this is our core belief at Rising Team is that the most successful companies and teams will live at the intersection of AI and deep human connection. And we see it already happening now. So the best users of AI are the ones who give it as clear as possible direction up front and then use their judgment to rate it at the end, right? Rather than doing that manual work, they're using their judgment, their strategy. So the new world will be people spending that kind of front and back end time with AI. I'm going to guide it well. I'm going to then use my judgment to make sure it did what I wanted. And they will be able to spend so much more time on the human parts because AI will be doing the work that is not as human.
Mhm.
And things like hard conversations about whether you're getting promoted or not will always be human. Until you work for an AI as a manager,
Right.
it will always be human. And the nice thing is AI can help us help us get better at those conversations because we get a lot more practice. At the end of the day, it's still human to human that I have to have that conversation in the first place. So the best leaders will be the ones who learn how to really effectively use AI, especially in giving it the right direction, and then maintain their strong human empathy.
Yeah. So one Gartner study also mentioned about how humans will be also responsible for managing agents.
Yes.
So that's an
Yes.
interesting perspective. We'll have to see as it evolves.
That's right. And I think we are already seeing some of this. So as I mentioned, we're working on some agents at Rising Team, and uh, so excited for when these are able to come out. They do still need a lot of guidance, though, maybe even more than human employees, because they don't have the same kind of automatic judgment. Like a human, they may be wrong or they may be right, but they will always put some amount of judgment into what you ask them. So if I say, write me a weekly update, let's take that example, like write me a weekly update of the top 3 things you did this week. A human will be able to use their own judgment with just that as guidance. AI, right now, we have a tool that's drafting some weekly updates for us, and it just needs so much more guidance and prompting than you would think. I thought this is going to be a super easy task for an AI, but if you have 20 things in your task list and 15 things in your calendar, and it tries to say these are the 3 most important things you did last week, it can't do that without guidance from
Right.
me about what may or may not be important. So humans will only get the most out of AI agents if they really are clear on what they want. Like our engineering team, my CTO says he barely writes code anymore,
Mhm.
because he uses so many AI agents. It's easier for him to do that at the
Yeah.
very senior level than for
Yeah.
more junior engineers for whom it doesn't come as easily to guide the AI.
Right. Yeah, coding has become easy right now. That's why as one of the founders we had on the show talked about how vibe coding, earlier it was like they were very scared of coding something. Now it is you're doing with the vibe.
Yes, exactly. It democratizes who can do it. And
Yeah.
at the same time, I do believe that things like building really complex system architectures and, safety constraints and so forth, that it's helpful to have a human judgment in there. And I'm sure you probably see that in the work your company
Yeah,
does too.
that's exactly what we do actually at YO is we build those governance and modeling and cybersecurity and design principles, security principles imbibed into the architecture and engineering. So
Yes, yes.
yes, definitely. So Jennifer, could you share a case study which is a real example of a team that transformed how they worked using a Rising Team? And this again, you also touched about how you had metrics between before the Rising Team and after the Rising Team. But can you share your passionate use case that truly made a difference with your product?
Well, honestly, it's hard to pick one because
Sure.
this literally is happening at all of our customers. We don't have a single customer for whom we don't see their metrics move up. I think the way I would explain it, you can see it on our website if you're curious, because we have something we call the sea of testimonials. Every day, as people finish their Rising Team sessions and practice their conversations with the role play partner, we see constant feedback coming in. And the quotes that people say, the things that they say are just like, for instance, people will say things like, I know this team better in the last, because of the last 2 hours than I have in the last 5 years of working together. And that's, what's really incredible about watching it work is just that we give people the tools to be much more intentional about these things than they were before. And most managers didn't really know how to do this. So they generally weren't doing it at all. So I think if I think about a concrete example, most of what I see is at the org wide level. So I would look at a company and say, okay, and I'm going to keep the company name out of it at the moment because our customers are somewhat
Yeah.
confidential in their data. But there was a big manufacturing company. They had a lot of leadership change at the top. They had a big engagement survey drop, and their board was coming to the people team and the executives at the company saying, what are we going to do about this? We're seeing attrition. We're seeing these engagement numbers drop. What's the plan?
Mhm.
And it's hard to put together a plan
Mhm.
that's company wide, that's affordable, that you can scale, that will move the numbers. This is why I used to pull out my hair as an executive, because I would also get those surveys back and I would see
Right.
something drop and I had no idea how to fix it.
Mhm.
So we came up with a custom program for them. It uses standard Rising Team sessions and the AI coach. But we organized the order based on the survey gaps that they had seen. And within 1 quarter, we see reversal of all of those scores. And as one example,
Wow.
their IT team, which had been having particular challenges, went from a negative net promoter score to a positive one, even within just 1 quarter of using Rising Team.
Wonderful. No, thank you for sharing that case study. So we are actually almost towards the end, and we call it as a lightning round, which is a
Sure.
set of 5 questions. So, what is one leadership principle you live by?
I suppose I try to live by what's called the platinum rule, which is treat people how they want to
Like
be
to be
treated,
treated. Yeah,
not how I want to be treated.
yeah, yeah. That's wonderful, actually. What is one early indicator of a healthy team?
I think one early indicator is that people are willing to share things they're struggling with, either inside or outside of work. So we created, for instance, 2 Slack channels that we use internally in our own company for this. One is called Festival of Failure, which I mentioned before, which is just like, when I make a mistake at work, I'm going to post it and I'm going to share it with other people so that they can learn from my mistake. And there's no shame, absolutely no shame in saying I did something wrong. And the other is called resilience support,
Oh,
which is
nice.
when people are just having a hard time, often with something outside of work that's personal or global politics and things like that. And people could just say, hey, I'm having a hard time with this today. and other people can chime in to support them and know that it's a safe space to do that, those
Right.
are signs that the team is likely to be on a path to.
I like that. Especially you walk into like Whole Foods or any of these grocery chains. Generally, I mean, it's my personal observation. People are generally very happy
Yes.
and they show off their badges, it's just impressive and people, it just tells you how teams work.
Exactly, exactly, and you can see the rapport between them and all
Yeah.
of that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So one common leadership mistake you see repeatedly.
This is what I said earlier, which is I don't have time for team building, right? And
Okay.
the example I use here is if anyone has seen Top Gun Maverick, which is one of my favorite movies, he takes them to the beach to play flag football, and the admiral comes and he says, "You have this world saving mission, and we have so little time. Why are you here playing games?" And he says, "You told me to create a team, sir."
Right.
Right? Like
Right.
you just can't do it. It's worth the time, and the results show it.
That's true. And no one person can do everything. It's a
Yeah,
team effort. That synergy really makes things happen.
that's right.
Yeah. So what is one simple habit every manager should practice?
I haven't thought about this one. I would say clarity of focus, because it's the best thing you can do is make it clear to your team what is most important. What I see happening a lot is people, and I actually posted about this on LinkedIn today. People will have 15 goals, and you say, of course you want to do 15 things, but if you do the 10 things that are the least important, it actually won't be a success. Your team needs to understand the most important things so that they focus their time on that. And I do what I call the big three at the beginning of every year, where I say, if we could look back on this year and we only
Yeah.
did three things,
Yeah.
what would they be?
I like that, Jennifer. So clarity definitely is a process by itself, actually. So
Yes.
I like that. So one book, concept, or thinker inspiring you today.
Well, this is a non-business book, but I will tell you that my favorite book I've read recently is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, which is
I'll
the
check that out.
same author who wrote The Martian, which is one of my favorite books and movies. And Project Hail Mary is about to become a movie. I think it's getting released this year too.
Oh, wow.
I highly recommend this book. It is not directly about leadership, but I believe, and my LinkedIn newsletter, in case anyone wants to sign up, is called Leadership is Everywhere. And it's all about leadership lessons that come from pop culture and books and so forth. And this book, without any spoilers, has a lot of leadership lessons in it, because it's all about how we learn to communicate with people who think differently than us. And that is very important
Yes.
inside leadership and teams.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful, Jennifer. What would be your message to investors and to the engineering community? I mean, you build such a great product, right? So, engineering community would be super interested on what kind of tech stack you could have used, or if
Yeah.
a Rising team has APIs that they can consume.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, on the engineering side, I would say we're always happy to connect, to share, swap stories about how we build things. The most important thing I would say is wherever you work and in any kind of organization, you have the power to build a really high performing team, which means you will get the most effective business results too. And so I would encourage people to think about potentially using Rising Team. We don't currently have APIs, but we are thinking about how do we integrate less so with people outside our customer base, but more so with people who use Rising Team. There's a lot of data and insights coming out of the sessions that we believe can be integrated into other tools they use and other, LLMs and Copilot that they may use in-house. So we're thinking about that. And we're always happy to also talk about partnerships potentially if people are interested. On the investing side, oh boy, there's so much happening on the AI side and so much froth right now. I would say, again, portfolio companies, if investors have them and they want them to be retaining their top talent and driving high performance on their teams, that we give, maybe I just give a special discount to anyone who's a watcher of your podcast or a listener to your podcast. We would be
That's
happy to do
wonderful.
that.
I'm sure the audience will be super happy with that, Jennifer. Yeah. So has been a very insightful conversation, Jennifer, especially how Rising Team is transforming the way leaders build connection, trust, and performance inside their teams. So I give you kudos for actually not only building and also trying to teach at Stanford and have that go back and forth as well, to the student community as well, shaping new leaders and role playing. So thank you.
Sure. It's a delight for me because essentially I'm building the product I wish I had had as a leader of teams. So it's so fun to build it and to give it to other people. And my true belief is that anybody can be a great leader. Not everyone may want to be, because sometimes what it requires, going deep with people and really understanding them may not be appealing to everyone. And that is also okay if you don't want to do it. For anyone who does, though, I truly believe you can. And we're working on making the tools to make that easier.
It's wonderful. So for our audience, if they have to reach out to you, what is the best way?
So risingteam.com is the website, supermanager.ai if you want to learn more there. And then I am at Dulski, Dulski, on LinkedIn and, Threads and Twitter, X, whatever you call it, and so forth,
Oh,
if you want to
wonderful.
connect with me.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer Dulski, for having you on the show. Until
Thanks
then,
for having me. It was great to have this conversation.
thank you.